emotional evening for all of us. My name is Antonella Ventura, and I'm an Italian, Australian, and Jewish woman. I'm a member of the National Council of Jewish Women, and I sit on the Engagement Committee and Social Justice Committee. As a psychiatrist, I've spent a large proportion of my career, my working life, working with Aboriginal people mostly in the Northern Territory, both the top end and Alice Springs Central. So I am very well aware of the themes of sorrow, suffering, which have struck those communities historically through white man's intervention and particularly the stolen generation. Just as an aside, our national president, Linda Ben-Menashe, is currently a speaker in a different webinar. She will be joining us shortly, though, and will be taking questions. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands we're meeting from across Australia. I currently stand on the lands of the Bidjigal, Biribirigal, and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and I recognize their enduring connection to the land, waters, and continuing cultures in the area. But as today is National Sorry Day, I also pay my respect to the stolen generation survivors. We at National Council of Jewish Women Australia recognise the ongoing nature of trauma experiences of Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islanders and Australian South Sea Island people and commit each day to survivor-led intergenerational healing. I extend that respect to our esteemed panelists on this webinar, Pastor Ray Minniecon, Imelda Davis and Paula Bassett. We are very privileged to hear from Pastor Ray, an Aboriginal pastor with roots in the Kabakibi, I'm not sure how to say that, I hope I said it right, and Garagan tribes of Queensland. He lives in Sydney and has dedicated his life supporting members of the stolen generation. As you probably know, he infamously came under very shameful attack when he was booed on ANZAC Day this year. It's an event that, as Australians, we must feel very ashamed of. Imelda Davis made history as the first Black woman elected to the City of Sydney Council. That was between 21 and 24, I believe. And as a second-generation Australian South Sea Islander of diverse Indigenous ancestry, Amanda is the founder of the Australian South Sea Islanders Association, Port Jackson, and advocates for social justice and equity across communities. She advocates for recognition of the descendant of the Australia's blackbirding trade. And for those of you who are not aware of it, I'm sure that Imelda will enlighten us all about that sorry chapter of her history. She wrote The Children of the Sugar Slave, Black and Resilient. Paula-Rose Bassett is a proud Wiradjuri and Wakka Wakka woman. She's a lawyer, she's a social worker, and she's passionate about justice, advocacy, and strengthening outcomes for First Nation communities. With the experience across law and social work and community leadership, she's committed to advancing conversations around truth-telling, equity, and culturally safe systems. Paula is about to move to Darwin to follow her passion as an advocate for Australian Aboriginal and Torres Island people. And our moderator tonight is Courtney Winter-Peters, the former CEO and current board member for StandUp, which is National Council of Jewish Women Australia partners in putting on this webinar. Under Courtney's leadership, StandUp delivered its Call Halab campaign in support of the Voice referendum, and she championed initiatives to build greater understanding between communities and foster mutual allyship. Courtney brings strong passion for social justice and the Jewish community. Now, there are so many cultural resonances between Aboriginal, Torres Island people and Australian South Pacific Island people and the Jewish people. They include our experience of intergenerational trauma and our Indigenous connection to land. And this is National Sorry Day 2026 marks the 29th anniversary of tabling the Bring Them Home report of 1997. Many of those recommendations have not been implemented. I'm sure I don't need to remind you of that. As stated in the Healing Foundation website, sorry without action is just not enough. This year's national theme, From Sorry to Action, reflects expectations that government take urgent steps to create tangible and measurable change within the survivor's lifetime. Having said that, I'll hand you over to Courtney.
All right, I'm unmuted. Thank you, Antonella, and thank you everyone for being here tonight, especially to our three incredible panelists. It's always hard when we've got such a short amount of time to hear everything from them that we want to, so we'll try and get straight into it. I first want to turn to all our panelists and recognising that this is Reconciliation Week, and today is Sorry Day, and the theme for Reconciliation Week being all in. So it signifies how we can all participate in this process together and how we can all listen and learn from each other. I really want to hear about each of your own individual stories and what brings you here today. So Paula, I might actually start with you as our youngest member on the panel, and someone who wasn't actually born for the first Sorry Day. Paula, I'm curious about what National Sorry Day has meant to you in the context of your own childhood and upbringing, and whether this was something that was openly spoke about as you were growing up, and how your understanding of it has evolved over time.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. I first want to acknowledge my ancestors, past and present, and acknowledge that I'm here meeting on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. Yeah, so National Sorry Day has always been deeply personal to me. I grew up as a proud Aboriginal woman, and conversations around justice, survival, and advocacy were lived realities. Some of my earliest memories were of attending marches and protests with my family as a little girl. And there are even like newspaper cutouts of me sitting in a pram at rallies for change. So from a very young age, I understood that our people have always had to fight for our voices to be heard. At the same time, I also carry my own lived experience of removal. So my parents had me at a very young age, and I was forcibly removed from their care before eventually being raised by my grandmother. I've also unfortunately witnessed the removal of my younger siblings, cousins, and so many other in my communities. So our children are still being removed at disproportionate rates. So just to put into perspective, the recent 2026 figures from the Productivity Commission's report show that although First Nations children aged from 0 to 17 make up approximately 7% of the national population, they account for almost half of our children placed in out-of-home care, and that is increasing each year. I think that's why this year's theme, From Sorry to Action, the Sorry Day 2026 theme, resonates so deeply with me. Sorry Day is not just about reflection, but accountability and meaningful change. As I step into community work, both as a lawyer and a social worker up in Darwin in the Northern Territory, I know it will be confronting at times, but I'm hopeful that this generation can help end these cycles and create a brighter future for our Djadjams connected to family, community, and country. And the word Djadjams means children in the Bundjalung Nation, but is quite, normalised for all of us here. Yeah.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you for sharing your own story as well. And it's a real reminder that days like Sorry Day, it's a reminder that there's still so much work to do. I know Antonella in the intro spoke about the recommendations that haven't been implemented, and all the advocacy work that you do is just a testament to the path that we're on and hopefully on together. I just wanted to remind everyone, sorry, we are going to allow time for questions at the end. We've got about 15 minutes for questions. If you could direct all your questions to Linda Bemenasha, who's available, and she'll be filtering the questions. Uncle Ray, I'd like to turn to you now. Your life has carried so many layers. Your work as a pastor, your advocacy for stolen generation survivors, and your own experience as a serviceman. I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about your own upbringing, and how those experiences shaped your understanding of identity, service, and what Sorry Day means to you personally.
Look, first of all, I just want to acknowledge and honour the National Council of Jewish Women here in my country. And I'm here on Gadigal country, so I'm acknowledging their people and their history and their stories as well. I just want to acknowledge the 103 years of service. It's an extraordinary witness to leadership, to compassion and public contribution. And your history reminds us that communities become strong, not by protecting their own interests, but by investing in the common good. And I'm always deeply moved by hearing that your organisation began with listening, asking women what they were carrying, asking what had to be changed, what needed to be changed, and asking where leadership was needed. My connection to the Jewish community is through my grandfather. His name was James Lingadoc, Private James Lingadoc. He was in the 11th Light Horse, and he was there in the Palestinian conflict of 1917, in the around the charge of Beersheba at that time. It was the 12th and the 4th that did the actual charge, but he was in the area there with a number of other First Nations soldiers in the 11th Light Horse, which was called the Black Watch. And so he was there to witness that particular defeat of the Ottoman Empire at Beersheba, and also there to witness the time when the Balfour Declaration came into play in November the 2nd, 1917. And so I have that kind of connection to you as a people, and other connections too, as you say, I'm a Christian. And the book that we look at is your book, the book that you wrote, your ancestors wrote, and that we have learned so much from. And so for me, I was brought up in a remote community on a mission in Queensland, a bit like what you guys experienced also when you were put onto reservations and stuff. That's what happened to us. And so those particular impacts are still with us today. And we know that Australia was not peacefully settled, and many places experienced so much conflict and displacement and grief. And the impacts of colonisation are not just historical events, they remain present realities in all of our health systems, justice, housing, education, economic outcomes, because we know that our sovereignty has never been ceded. It remains deeply held in the understanding of all of our peoples. And we know also, as we've seen and experienced in this country, that racism is not individual prejudice. It's embedded in the systems and the structures of this country. Actually, to give you an example of how deep that racism is, and the sufferings that our people have had to endure, when they sat down to write the Constitution back in 1901, there was a politician there. His name was King O'Malley, and he said this about me and my people. He said that there is no scientific evidence that the Aborigine is a human being at all. So we were wiped out before we even began, before the Constitution was written. That's that's genocide from the beginning points of this country in terms of writing us out of this story of our own country. So we know that these particular stories are very, very painful and hurtful. And so the impacts are very, very real for us. But we know that for us, sovereignty was never ceded. And that country for us is not land ownership alone. It's all about our identity, our law, our kinship, our spirituality, our obligations, our belonging. And that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures are not relics of the past, but they're living systems, one of the oldest living systems on the planet, the oldest living cultures on the planet. And those living systems of knowledge we need now for our future generations because of the ways in which we are destroying this little thing we call Mother Earth. And the pain expressed after the voice referendum was not simply about a political result. Many of us had opened up those questions of recognition again, belonging and being heard. And we saw the rise again of that incredible evil that we know, as you know, of this incredible racism that's embedded into the systems and structures of this country. And so we're fighting together. We need to stay together, and we need to continue to make sure that we, as a nation, learn to walk together. I love what your organisation or what your people are doing, and that you women are leading the way. You're being guided by elders. Similar to us, you're listening to your communities, and you're trying to build a nation where disagreement never becomes dehumanizing. And so I honor you. I honor the opportunity that I have to meet with you tonight and to tell a few of the incredible challenges and stories of my people. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for the reminder of the long history of connection between our communities. It means a lot to be reminded of that, particularly right now. I just wanted to touch on something as well. You mentioned the wounds that have been opened post the referendum, the voice referendum, and specifically, so Antonella touched on it in her intro about you, Uncle Ray. We all recently saw the footage of what happened on ANZAC Day and how you were booed, and we just, firstly, sorry, a deep-hearted and a deeply felt sorry, and from whoever will take that. But I just want to ask you a question about what that felt like in that moment, if you're happy to share, and did that moment reveal something to you about where Australia is currently sitting at this moment in time?
Look, it wasn't what I would call unusual, so it didn't surprise me, because racism for us is an everyday experience. And so that experience of either abusing us in some way or at some public gathering like this and trying to silence our voices is not unusual. We've had it so often. The only thing that I would say is that it happened at a sacred place, at a sacred site. And that was the most distressing thing. And I knew I couldn't help that, and I couldn't stop that. And I knew I just had to keep on doing my duty for my people, for my community, for my nation, and for all of those who had fought for this country. And I think our stand as a nation against that kind of thing, I felt your strength. I felt everybody's strength there at that particular moment. So therefore, I didn't have to bow my head or anything to that kind of evil. And I just want to say thank you for all the strength and the life and the love and the power you have given us, especially at that particular moment. Thank you.
I'm glad you've come out the other end feeling the love and the compassion and the warmth. I'm not sure I would have had the same strength. So much respect for you and the strength you've shown throughout your journey and your advocacy all along the way. So thank you again.
Mm.
Imelda, over to you now. Your story and advocacy have brought visibility to histories that many Australians still know very little about. And I think it's really important to take this moment during National Reconciliation Week and Sorry Day to talk about it. So as an Australian South Sea Islander woman, and as someone whose family history is directly connected to blackbirding, and I'm sure that's a term that many people on this call might not be familiar with, I'd love to hear a little bit about your history, your upbringing, and how your story has shaped the work you do today.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge country that I'm on the land of the Gadigal, one of the 29 clans of the Eora Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge all of those people and those lands that you're on, the traditional owners for the lands, wherever you may be zooming in from. A huge acknowledgement of the speakers and you, Courtney, who are participating here today. It's such an honour, it really, really is, and such an important time in history to have this Zoom, and with the climate of what's occurred in Australia for the Jewish communities. And thank you to the National Council of Jewish Women and our dear friend Linda Ben Mesher, who we first met, close to a decade ago, if not more, but for embracing the communities, Aboriginal, Torres Strait and Australian South Sea Islander communities, and really working with Australian South Sea Islanders in particular to put us on the map in terms of that cultural inclusion and diversity, and introducing us to new pathways and opportunities in sharing this history. I'm a proud Australian South Sea Islander woman. I'm second generation born. My mother's father was stolen from the island of Vanuatu. He was 12 years old and he was brought to Bundaberg to cut sugarcane. My great-great-grandmother, Sarah Buki-Tor, she was stolen from Umbai in Vanuatu and brought to Maryborough as a house girl. And my great-great-grandfather, Terry Santo, he's from Aboriginal mission in Hervey Bay. And that Santo name has become quite popular or ingrained in the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander communities of Innisfail, Townsville, Cape York, Bamaga, Errab Island, because these locations also were settlements for our mob, yeah? So when you talk about Cherbourg and the ration shed there and Palm Island and those places, there were 60-odd thousand brought here from the Pacific, Melanesian men, young men, women and children, and they were placed on these mission stations and plantations. So my history is complex. I'm born in Brisbane, raised on the Tweed, Chinra, which is a real hub for political activism. So I was born into it, black activism, I should say. And I was born into it. So our families like Mrs. Faith Bandler or Dr. Faith Bandler, Order of Australia, Auntie Benita Marbo, these are all founding elders of our organisation. Auntie Shireen Malamu, our first ANZAC commissioner, even Pastor Ray Minniecon and the work that we've done over the years, family belong us. Uncle Graham Mooney, and I say their names because these are the elders that supported our organisation in particular, but laid the foundation for us to build on. Auntie Avis Dagara and Uncle Victor Corowa. So these, this is a struggle that's been going on for 178 years or 79 years now, and it started with New South Wales. One of the challenges that we've had with New South Wales is to get recognition of the celebrated entrepreneur Benjamin Boyd for his role he played in blackbirding in New South Wales in particular. Port Jackson, Australian South Sea Islanders, Port Jackson is the first port built in Australia in 1790s that received our people, and it also received the African people, all the convicts and Jewish people on those first fleets. So in unpacking the truth of a history and a state in particular, we've sort of focused on more recently Benjamin Boyd and what occurred there. And unearthing that history, we've been working with a gentleman called Ryan Butter, who's a non-fictional writer, and there's a book to be released, which I want to share with everybody, on those atrocities and the diaries of those slavery ship owners. And that really tells the truth of what occurred, which aligns with all of those stories within our communities and the atrocities that happened for us. And I guess, I hope I'm not off track with the question, but I mean, activism for me, being fortunate to step into the political space, it's all about self-determination and Blackness, and making sure that, you know, you're guided by your mentors, your ancestors, stepping in there and just really challenging the status quo. I might leave it there because I can talk more about other stuff, but you know, the Scott Morrison some years back, you know, he denied that Australia had a slave trade. Now there's a slavery map of this country, yeah, of Aboriginal slavery. And then there's South Sea Islander slavery for the people, or the 60,000 that were taken from the 80 islands of Vanuatu, Solomons, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Fiji, New Caledonia, and Papua New Guinea. I'll just leave it there for now.
Yeah, and if you want to share that book you mentioned in the chat for anyone who might be interested, because even when I listen to you talk, I'm just reminded there's so much of a history to learn all around the slave trade and blackbirding. That's something that I'm still actively learning about. So,
and may I just say, Courtney, in sort of unearthing this and really standing strong in that South Sea recognition, where I'm from in Tweed, you've got Chindra. I don't know if mob know Gold Coast, Tweed Heads, the border of New South Wales and Queensland. You've got Chindra and you've got Fingal. And I'm from Chindra, which is really strong Australian South Sea Islander. You know, Auntie Phyllis Coral was my mum's sister, and very, you know, different to Shane Phillips and mob from Fingal. Yeah. So even though we all know that we're mixed, or we've got this connection, a lot of people don't understand the complexity that Australian South Sea Islanders are really the intersectionality of all this, of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, people in the house. I guess, you know, even our own mobs are still grappling with understanding, because I've found a lot of people saying, oh yeah, I've got a bit of South Sea there, but I don't know nothing about it. I know that I'm a Pacific Islander and all the rest of it. And since we've been really delivering a lot of great workshops with the support of our Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander families and communities, it's really starting to open up the truth of a nation, and what occurred, and putting it into perspective. But I will share this book because I've written the foreword for it, which I'm really honoured to have done, but it's gut-wrenching to think, or the reality that what was passed down by my grandfather and other families in our communities, it's not far from the truth at all in these diaries. And it's the ship owners' diaries. It's horrific. But at the same time, resilience is a beautiful thing, and we have hope.
I think that you can hold on to hope, and resilience is an incredible thing.
Yeah.
And you know, you've touched on the importance of storytelling and that passing down to generations, and how important that is. And that's certainly a message and an understanding that our community can resonate with. You know, storytelling and how we carry our story is so important to all of our traditions. And I just wanted to touch on that, and kind of, you mentioned the importance of truth, and I might, Pastor Ray, I'll go over to you with this one, because today also marks 9 years since the Uluru Statement of the Heart, which called for voice, treaty and truth. And I think there's a number of people that would have said truth was probably one of the most, probably a really key part of that. So I just wanted to ask you about truth telling and the significance of it and what it means to you, because it's a phrase we're hearing more and more in Australia, but it's feeling like it's something harder and harder to engage with in some parts. So what does truth telling mean to you?
Actually, two things. I've got about, or a number of things, you know, I can say about truth telling from our perspective. But just to remind us that also on the 3rd of June, we have Mabo Day, And once again, this Jewish connection is very relevant and prominent there, because it was the Jewish lawyers who took that case and won it. I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I also wanted to acknowledge two women who've been very, very helpful in not in my connections with the Jewish community, but also in the support to make the Stolen Generations and a whole range of other programs work in our country, and that's Alice Spiegelman and Jennifer Simmons. Truth telling. Oh yeah, and Anne, you're there too. I can see you, Anne. You're trying to hide. Some very, very simple things. Look, truth telling is not history. It's accountability. It asks what happened, who benefited, who carries the cost. Truth telling is not blame. It's liberation, because the truth frees both the oppressed and those who are trapped in denial, the oppressor. Truth telling means naming the unfinished business of colonization, dispossession, frontier violence, child removal, language loss, exclusion, and systematic inequality. That's all about truth. Truth telling restores memory to country, because our country remembers us just as it remembers you people. It remembers what library and archives forgot. It doesn't deny us. It doesn't refuse us. And so we know our country. Truth telling means listening to our elders as knowledge holders and not treating our voices or our elders' voices as optional commentary. Truth telling is spiritual work. Healing cannot come where silence protects injustice. Truth telling is not symbolic reconciliation. It's structural transformation, changing laws, institutions, education, economics, and relationships. And truth telling means Australia becoming mature enough to hold pride and pain at the same time. And truth telling asks not only what happened, but what do we do now? I'm reminded of a very beautiful old lady. She was a Holocaust survivor who reminded us once that, you know, what did she say? I don't live in the past, but the past still lives in me. I found that very, very powerful in the ways I approach truth and our history and our stories. And so, you know, Australia was not peacefully settled. We know that. We know that the impacts of colonisation are not historical events. They remain present, or present realities in our health systems, our justice, our housing, our education, our economic outcomes. And we also often say that sovereignty, the sovereignty of the Gadigal people here has never ceded, and remains a deeply held understanding for many First Nations peoples. And so when I'm acknowledging country, I'm also acknowledging sovereignty of the First Peoples. And racism is not only individual prejudice, like I said before, it's embedded in our systems and structures in this country. And for us, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures are not relics of the past, but they are living systems of knowledge that we know need to be shared today. And so that I better stop there, because I could say go on and on and on, but
I mean, an hour is definitely not enough for the three of you, and we all acknowledge that. It's really hard to kind of move on to the next question. But I just wanted to say about truth telling, I think you touched on a really powerful concept, because I think sometimes when we hear truth telling, there's a little bit of a, you kind of feel your shoulders tense, because it's, you did touch on this, there's the hard truths of it, but then there's also, you spoke about the beauty of truth and the freeing side of it, the liberation and the connect, like the country as well. And I think that is a really powerful concept that for people to hear and to share in, that yes, there's the hard part, but it leads to a really beautiful part. And I think that wording, and I don't know the wording off the top of my head, is actually in the Uluru Statement of the Heart. Like when the cultures are shared amongst everyone, it can lead to really positive outcomes. It's worded much better than that. I recommend you read it. So we were just talking about truth, and I kind of want to look towards advocacy now and what that looks like. And Paula, I might turn to you for this question. You're at such an important part of your own journey. And I know this because I've known you for a couple of years. You've been studying really hard as a lawyer, and you had this dream that I remember you said to me, you wanted to like go out on a bus to communities and provide advice. And you're essentially doing that. You're going up to Darwin, you're leaving your family, you're leaving your community to go and give back essentially. And it's definitely something that Jewish communities understand. We really understand that advocacy and standing up for ourselves and as well as for others. But I just wanted to ask you what you've learned about advocacy and standing up for community, particularly from the elders in your life and other elders you've met, and particularly First Nations women, given that we're in a National Council of Jewish Women space here. But how have these people guided or influenced you along the way?
Yeah. Thanks for remembering our conversations, Courtney. We've had some good yarns over the years. Love that. So a lot of what I understand about advocacy has come from my elders, and specifically First Nations women coming from a strong matriarchal line in my family. And they've shown me that it doesn't start in formal systems. It starts with how we show up for people, how knowledge is carried, and how accountability is held within community. It is less about visibility or being the loudest voice and more about what actually protects dignity and keeps people safe. One of my biggest lessons I've learned is that advocacy requires endurance, especially when things are complex or emotionally heavy. It also requires interdependence. So knowing when to lean on community, peers, and allies, so the work remains sustainable. So during the voice referendum, as another example, I found that period really, really difficult as a First Nations woman, and I had to rely on my allies and peers to really stay grounded and keep engaging in a constructive way. And by allies, I mean people who aren't First Nations, but who listen deeply, learn, speak up when it matters, even when I don't have a voice. And they use their position to support truth-telling and justice in ways that are accountable to me as a First Nations woman in my community. I actually had an example as well that can be reversed. I went to Vinnie's College at Potts Point, and I had quite a lot of Jewish friends there. And I went to Shalom at UNSW, and actually one of my best friends is online right now, and she's a Jewish woman. So hey, Ella. And there was a time, I think, when there was a lot of complex politicalness in the air, and no one really had a lot of education about things. And I have been working with Stand Up for quite a few years, and going into schools and connecting with the kids and teaching them about culture. And I had a society at UNSW, or still have one, called Little Sister Big Sister, and we promoted our partnership with Stand Up. And there was a lot of backlash because there wasn't a lot of education about what was going on in the world. And I remember, firstly, that I know that I worked with quite a few girls, and I didn't really want anyone to kind of take the brunt of it. So I really took a stand and put my name out there and my face, and opened the space for a discussion in Shalom, where some of the girls that were bullying me relentlessly actually for quite a few months, and try to make a massive thing about it. And I think just drawing on this advocacy, and I spoke with my grandma, who is my elder, and she always reminded me just to kind of be a voice for when other people are voiceless. And I just felt like the Jewish community felt really silenced, and felt like you couldn't speak during this turbulent time. And I just remember just really not backing down. And it's so crazy to think that, I just didn't mind taking it, knowing that there was a community behind me that just felt really voiceless. And just remembering that during periods where I felt really voiceless, it was my allies that stood up for me. What I've taken from that is advocacy isn't only about standing up for issues that mirror your own experience. It's also about staying engaged for others, even when it's uncomfortable, complicated, or outside your immediate perspective. And just linking it into my next chapter of my life, as I move into community work in Darwin as a young lawyer, these are all lessons that I carry with me. Advocacy is relational, it's ongoing. And yeah, I'm excited to just consistently show up for what I believe in and for the communities that don't have a voice. And I'm really proud that, that's kind of the way that I'm going to look at life and continue being this way. So yeah.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
You are.
also,
You are. And I remember when you went through that, and I remember the impacts it had on you and the fact that you keep going and that you're all here tonight on this event has not gone unnoticed. And yeah, I echo what everyone said, that you're amazing. I think you're all amazing, actually. And in case we don't get to say it later, all the best in Darwin.
yeah.
But I want to kind of continue a little bit on what we were just speaking then, because I think it's really important, because we're looking at what's next and how we kind of keep this advocacy and allyship going, because you've all spoken about specific examples between Jewish community and First Nations people, like over the years. These are relationships that are not new. They stretch back a really long time. So Imelda, I'll turn to you, because from where I sit in Jewish community spaces, there's often a real genuine desire to engage, but sometimes a fear of maybe saying the wrong thing. And sometimes in this like increasingly polarized world, it can feel harder and harder to hold on to relationships and connections and to keep advocating. So what would you say to communities who genuinely want to stay engaged in these conversations and relationships, but feel unsure about how to do that respectfully or confidently?
For me personally, and even when people are approaching about, blackbirding, and I don't know what term to use, it's about kindness, right? It's about, for me personally, right? It's about being able to listen, not take offense to what they might say at any given moment, because some people don't know what to say and they'll say the wrong thing, but being able to correct them and engage them to be a part of, some sort of innovation or initiatives that will assist diffusing the fear around what's happening. We've got an initiative called You, Me, All Geta, You and Me All Together. And it really works with people, especially our older generations as well. They've been saying to me, oh, I didn't feel confronted about what you're talking about. So I think everyone has to take responsibility for what occurred in this country. And it's also a shared Australian story. Yeah, it's not just my story, it's your story. Yeah. And it's really important that we understand each other as a family. And if you have that approach to a family perspective or a human rights perspective, or I don't know how you see your own family unit, then I think you can overcome a lot of that awkwardness around what's going on. It's about just being real, and look, I feel like crap, this happened. Some days, the constant emotional labor that goes into retelling the story of my grandfather is exhausting. Yeah. And you just need to share that and let people know that this is really hard. I need you to help me. We need help. And that's basically how I approach a lot of this stuff, like my beautiful neighbor who's online, Margaret, hey, and, really just dived in and started supporting. And then I've got the whole building coming to all the events and stuff. But I don't know how you feel, Margaret, but, it's like, it's not, I know it hurts. It hurts at times and you get angry and you get, like, why aren't you understanding? But I think it's just about stepping back a bit, breathing through it, and kindness will always prevail over all that other misery that's going on in the world, and think about it as this is someone's child. What would you do if that was your child? Yeah, put it into perspective. Yeah, because it is someone's child. So we can say, oh, well, it happened. It's okay. Let's forget about that. Well, you can't, because generational trauma is real. Psychological trauma is real, and it's anchored within our DNA. So how do we heal that? And that's through more engagement and understanding and kindness, really, because your blood can save my life. It doesn't matter what color you are.
Yeah.
There's some really beautiful, powerful words, a
Mm.
reminder just of friendship and that taking a breath. And I know that, firstly, I'm in such admiration. Like, it's exactly what you said, the emotional labor of keeping, like, you're constantly telling this story, you're constantly
Mm.
fighting, you're constantly, you know, racism is real. And you're all continually advocating for yourselves and for your community. So I really admire that. And I think our own community, you know, it feels really hard sometimes to speak up for ourselves and feel like people are listening. And I think a lot of people will be feeling the hurt in this seminar right now. So I want to thank everyone here for showing up and to be here to engage in the conversation and to be listening. It's hard. Before I throw over to Linda for some questions, I think she's got a couple from the audience. What I like to do is kind of end a conversation talking about hope. It's really important. I find it really important to, I think, Imelda, you spoke about hope earlier on, but to remember that even when things are really hard, there's got to be something good. There's got to be something that keeps us going, that keeps us working and advocating together. So, you know, I can tell you one thing that gives me hope is like listening to the way my kids learn. They were all talking about Sorry Day today, something that I don't think I learned in that detail when I was at school. So I see that shift there, but I wanted to throw over to the three of you, and if you could just quickly tell me what brings you hope right now. Paula, we'll start with you.
Sorry. Yeah, I guess what gives me hope in this generation particularly is the way that allyship is increasingly showing up in real visible ways, and how strong our communities are and how interconnected we all are. And I see more people from diverse backgrounds standing alongside us and vice versa, and consistently showing up when it matters. And that's just shows a lot of hope. And yeah, I'm really proud of that.
Imelda?
Paula gives me hope. It's just incredible work that you're doing as a young next generation. And I think, you know, hope is a beautiful thing. So being conscious around what goes on in your home, because it starts at home.
Mhm.
And if you really want to make a change, you got to start educating from your own personal lived experience and engaging with community, or teaching those around you that may have a different opinion or whatever. But it starts at home. It's how you live your life. It's your lens and how you choose to go through life. So hope for the future would be that more people get engaged, as we are with this webinar, and take those teachings or learnings or sharing even, because we're not all perfect. We don't all have the answers, right? We just do the best we can do. So back to our communities, back to our homes, and, you know, make sure that we do the right thing.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that answered the question, but anyway, it's just my thoughts around, you know.
Your thoughts are perfect.
Yeah,
Your
thank
thoughts just as they are.
Yeah.
Uncle Ray, what's giving you hope?
Actually, my wife and I started a little private Aboriginal school called Kawara. That gives me hope. And we were looking at what's the vision here? What's the purpose behind it all? And so we've come up with this notion that we're bridging worlds and building futures. That's what we're teaching our children, how to bridge these worlds that they're living in and build a future based within that. And that to me is like looking at a just future, where it's not going to be built by technology or AI or any of those other things, but it will require what you have already built over these 100 and so years as a women's movement. It will require deep listening and deeper curiosity. And so we're looking at asking much more these questions, I think, as a nation and me as a person. You know, what can I become or who am I becoming, or whose future will be shaped by my choices? How will I leave country and community and creation better than I found it? These are the questions that we're looking at when we look at a just future for our students at our school, and then taking those kind of lessons and trying to implement them in our community where there's very few opportunities for lots of young people, and their pathway is from home to jail. And somehow we've got to put in some guardrails there to stop them from going into jail all the time and try to find a just future for them. So yeah, it's trying to redefine what a just future looks like. Trying to redefine what we as Indigenous peoples have to give to this, and making sure that we do that on the basis of our own cultural integrity and our own cultural wisdom. Because, you know, the bigger picture that we all face here in this world, regardless of what nations we come from, is that we are now living in a world that is almost burning up.
Yeah.
And we just need to be a bit better about how we manage what God's creation, really. Go back into Genesis 1 again and try to figure out what we had, where we went wrong, and how we can reclaim that what God had created and placed us in this place to look after it. And our Indigenous peoples, I think, have the solutions to a lot of that, because we have looked after our country for 60,000, 70,000 years. And it's only taken 200 or so years to destroy what we have built up. And so we're now trying to figure out now, how do we then stop what's happening, or work with what's happening and try to build a better future for our futures, a just future. And I think that's the word I prefer to use, a just future, that where will continue to require us to listen intently and deeply with each other, and also have a deeper curiosity about ourselves, and then reimagine what our future should look like and could look like for all the things that we implement in our world. It's a tough one, I know, because we've got so many battles yet to come. Just telling our group of young people, our people, young leaders, I said, you're looking at racism now, which I have never experienced in my lifetime as powerful as this racism, but it's going to get worse. And so we need to brace ourselves for the future a little bit more, but also have the hope that we can build a just future out of it.
Thank you, all of you. I had full intentions of leaving 20 minutes for questions. I left 5. Linda, I think, is going to jump on now with maybe a question. Linda?
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you to Paula and Imelda and Uncle Ray. It's been very moving for me so far, very, very moving for me, and you have reminded me of so many things. I will ask one question from the audience, although there were so many, but I just want to say a couple of things first myself to you. I'm coming to you from Wallamadigal land, and I acknowledge the custodians of that land, and I acknowledge you as the elders. Actually, Uncle Ray and Imelda, you are the first elders that I met in my work in the Jewish community, actually. And Uncle Ray, you were the very first, and it was just incredible to me to meet with you all those years ago and to listen, and the grace that you showed then to an ignorant woman was so profound, and it is still emanating from you, and it did right through this webinar tonight. And actually the question that I'll ask refers to that too, so I'll leave that for a minute. And Imelda, what you taught me about resilience and what you taught me about your story, it just blew me away then, and it still does today. And we still wear our Sugarfest t-shirts from your events, and we tell the stories that you taught us when we wear those t-shirts as well. It's just, and I think about it every time I drive down Ben Boyd Road and I rail against the name, because
we got the name of the park changed.
I know that, and that's incredible advocacy. And actually, what you said, Paula, about relational advocacy as opposed to the transactional kind of way most of the world works, that relational advocacy is what Imelda and I think, have experienced all these years. We've tried to advocate for each other on so many different issues. And I think that partnership is one of the strongest ones for me in reality, in the world, but also in my heart. So thank you for reminding me about that, Paula, and also thank you for inspiring me, and I'm sure everybody on this call, with the fact that many in the Jewish community today, I think it's fair to say, kind of despair and imagine that people in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities in this country don't know about the relationship and the history of our people together. And hearing you say what you said just touched me so deeply, because it shows us that that relationship and that history and that truth is actually going forward. It's here in the present and it's going forward into the future. And so thank you for that injection of real hope.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question, but there's one other thing I want to say too. I think it was you, Imelda, who mentioned Faith Bandler and Kurt Bandler.
Yeah.
There's two things about that. Number one, they were my neighbours in Turramurra many years ago. And it was just unbelievable to me, because of the lack of teaching I had about our history, that here was this Jewish Holocaust survivor, Austrian man, married to Faith Bandler, the woman who birthed the referendum that was so crucial in this country. I mean, honestly. And the other connection to that story is that on this call, as you mentioned, is an elder in our community, Anne Sarzen, who with her daughter, Lisa, wrote the amazing book Hand in Hand about our relationships.
That's right.
And I want to remind everybody and acknowledge her and remind everybody that we've actually built a website in the last couple of years, which brought the Hand in Hand book into the present, and which I'll actually send out to everybody after this webinar, because that relationship, those relationships, that history is there. We're building on it. We're telling people about it. And we want to use that website going forward, the Hand in Hand website, to build more of what we've had tonight here, and do the truth telling that's required and the building for the future. So thank you for all of that. I will ask the question that is left, and then we'll end up finishing 5 minutes late, but I don't think anybody will be terribly upset about that. There's a really good question here from Celia, which is, it refers to you, Uncle Ray, and it's a question for you specifically, about your grace, your wisdom, remaining calm and dignified under attack from extremists. She says, I would be interested to hear his advice for our country's leaders in how they can begin to tackle this normalisation of extreme responses in public speech and public behaviour. I think that's a question for all of us to ponder now. What would you say?
One, I'm saying to a lot of our I don't think we have the leadership to lead us out of this. And the trouble we have is the leadership in this country is not looking at the ways it can take our country to the next phase of a just outcome. It's looking to other countries to tell it how to do it. And sadly, that country that I'm talking about is not going in the right direction, and it's trying to drag us into all of its wars, all of its other stories. And why are we part of that? I don't know. And so our people just struggle with that. But on the positive side, Linda, you know, when I look at my story and our history, the people who made us who we are today are you Jewish people. You do not know the profound impact that your book has had upon our leadership. Many of our people, old people, who didn't go to school, could read the Bible. It was the only book that they could read. And out of that, what it taught us was a number of things, but it taught us that there was a bigger number of nations other than this Western nation that come and invaded us, because we couldn't see beyond that, beyond that. But that Bible told us about all these other nations. I said, oh, gee. And our people got strength from that, and they got hope from that. And so I think you people don't know how much influence you've had on our people through your values and through your culture and through your stories, because those stories are similar to our stories. And so we're interwoven, we're together, whether you like it or not. You can't get rid of us.
We like it.
And you know, there's so many stories. I mean, look, one story I will leave you with, and that is a very dear friend of mine. She converted to Judaism, and then you, a woman, made her the head of one of your blooming synagogues. She's a very dear friend.
Yeah.
And you know, what Paul was talking about there in terms of the New South Wales University, she's the one who instigated that with you guys, that scholarships and all that, and sent a lot of our people over to the universities in Israel there. I mean, who else does this? And so, you know, my heart goes out, it's just full of thankfulness to all of yous for all that yous have done for my people. Just so thankful.
Thank you, Uncle Ray. That's a lovely, lovely acknowledgement and gesture, and the love is returned in multiples. I will hand over now to Nikki Marjak, who is a board member of National Council of Jewish Women Australia and is the chair of our Social Justice Committee, and she will be doing our close tonight.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you to Stand Up for partnering with National Council on this Sorry Day event. This has been an incredibly moving webinar. I think we all could have kept listening for much longer, and as Linda says, the love is mutual. It's also been an optimistic webinar, I think, because to me it's been a model for what a meaningful and genuine dialogue can look like between our communities. Thank you also to Antonella for your beautiful opening. And as chair of National Council's Social Justice Committee, I would like to offer our sorry this sorry day for the injustices of the past, to the victims of the stolen generations and those who continue to feel and live the legacy of that trauma today. So on behalf of National Council, I want to thank deeply Paula-Rose, Imelda and Pastor Ray for your wisdom and generosity tonight, and extend our ongoing solidarity.
Many of you may be wondering how you might take some of the lessons we've learnt tonight and turn them into action. To that end, National Council and StandUp will be continuing these collaborative efforts to partner with First Nations communities, including a forum that combines the National Council salon model that we hold in people's homes with StandUp's truth-telling conversations, also held in intimate groups in a living room environment. And we look forward to bringing you more information about this program, which will bring Indigenous and Jewish women together as it progresses. So thank you to all of you for being here tonight, and good night.
Good night.